Welcome to The Explainer. We talk a lot about legacy. Is it something you're just born into, or is it something you have to build from the ground up? Well, today we're looking at a story that says it's both.
So, we're diving into Tina Knowles' memoir, Matriarch, and it opens with this just incredible declaration. And I want to be really clear here. This is so much more than a family tree. This is a mission statement, right? It's this quiet but unbelievably powerful claim of identity, an inheritance of strength passed down from one woman to the next. And that idea, it's the absolute beating heart of this entire book.
Okay, so to really get into her story, we're going to break it down into 4 key parts. We'll start with this incredible line of mothers she comes from, then we'll see how she learned to, make a way when there was no way. From there, we'll get into how she styled a global dynasty, and then finally, we'll look at her most personal journey of all, becoming Miss Tina.
All right, so first up, we've got to go back, way back, because the book makes one thing crystal clear. You can't understand Tina Knowles by starting with Tina Knowles. Nope, you have to start with the women who came before her. A history she was taught was so vital she had to memorize it.
And get this wasn't something she learned in a history class. This was an oral tradition, passed down to her by her mother, Agnes, right under a pecan tree in their backyard. I mean, look at this timeline. These names, Rosalie, Celestine, Odilia, Agnes, they weren't just names on a chart. They were stories. Stories of survival, of grace, of holding a family together when everything was against them. You have to remember, in a world where Black history was so often just erased, this kind of inheritance, well, it was worth more than any amount of money.
Okay, so this brings us to our second big idea. And honestly, this might be the most powerful theme in the whole book. That legacy of resilience, it wasn't just some nice family story. It was a straight-up survival skill. It's this concept she talks about all the time, making a way out of no way. And that's a philosophy born from pure necessity, forged in the Black American experience. It's all about creating opportunity, creating beauty, creating safety when society gives you absolutely nothing to work with.
And man, you see this in action from her earliest memories, and it is brutal. Her family lived on this place called Weeks Island, where one single salt company owned everything, the jobs, the store, even the house they lived in. So when her dad, Loomis, started trying to organize workers for better pay and safer conditions, well, the company's response was just merciless. They firebombed their house in the middle of the night.
So imagine that, in that moment of just absolute chaos, with everything they owned literally turning to ash, it was her mom who took control. Her words, right here, became their North Star. I'm getting my kids out of here. We're leaving. That's not just a decision, That's a lesson in survival. It's about relentless, forward momentum, and that lesson would define Tina's entire life.
Fast forward decades later, and she channeled that exact same spirit into her incredible Houston salon headliners. The blueprint for its success is right here. She didn't just open another business, she built a sanctuary. Let's walk through this. First, she saw a real need. Professional women's time wasn't being valued, so she fixed that. Second, she created this uplifting space by banning gossip. How cool is that? Third, she offered just irresistible value, building this fiercely loyal clientele. And finally, and this is so important, she mentored her stylists to help them build their own successful businesses. See, she was making a way, not just for herself, but for her whole community. All right, so this knack for building something with real vision and integrity, it leads us straight into her next and probably most famous chapter, styling a dynasty. But listen, this was never just about sewing cool outfits for Destiny's Child. It was a fight to protect their identity. And that battle, it took a whole lot more than just a needle and thread.
I mean, from day one, she was in a constant war with the record label execs. The label, they saw the talent for sure, but they wanted to sand down all the interesting edges. Their feedback was basically, they're too Black, too Texas. Can you believe that? They wanted something generic, something safer for a mainstream audience. But Tina knew their authenticity wasn't a bug. It was the whole feature. It was their superpower.
So what did she do? She just took control. When stylists would send over these racks of boring Black clothes, she'd hit the fabric stores herself. When the budget was literally zero, she designed and sewed everything from scratch. But if you need just one story to really understand her dedication, this is it. For their very first video, they didn't have enough platinum streaks for Beyoncé's hair, so she literally cut them from her own head to make the look work. I mean, come on, that is making a way in its purest, most incredible form.
And that brings us to the final part of her story. And honestly, it might be the most difficult one.
Because after building entire empires for everyone else, she was finally forced to turn inward and ask, who is the woman behind all those roles she played for so many years?
You know, after her 33-year marriage ended, and after decades of just nonstop work, the very foundation of her life just cracked. And for the first time, she had to face this absolutely terrifying question. Who am I? Without the title of wife, or mother, or stylist. Her whole identity was built around serving other people, and suddenly she was standing on completely new, completely uncertain ground.
She writes about this time with such stunning vulnerability. For the first time in her whole life, her superpower, that gut instinct to just push through and make a way, it just failed her. As she says in the book, her resilience would not take hold. And the result was terrifying. She felt completely, totally lost.
So, her path back to herself. It wasn't about finding another project to distract her. No, it was a really deliberate internal process. You can see the steps right here. It started with actually feeling the pain instead of just pushing it down. Then, she literally sat down and listed her own accomplishments to finally give herself some credit. She even declared a selfish era to her daughters, telling them, hey, it's my turn now. And finally, she went to therapy to really heal some of those old wounds. This was a totally new kind of work for her, and maybe the hardest work she'd ever done.
And all of that work leads to this, the book's most powerful, most hard-won revelation, all captured in this one sentence. After a lifetime of building and creating and fighting for everybody else, her greatest discovery was that she didn't need to do anything to be worthy. She just was. That's it. She was enough.
So in the end, Matriarch leaves us with this really powerful, provocative idea. It reframes that title, Matriarch, not as something you just inherit from your mother's line, but as a personal achievement. It's a conscious, courageous choice to take ownership of your own life, your own joy, and your own story. So the question it leaves us with is, what does it take for you to become the matriarch of your own story?